Chemical giant Bayer agrees to pay more than $10 billion to resolve cancer lawsuits over Weedkiller Roundup. South Africa plans to roll out the continent's first coronavirus vaccine trial. And Kosovo's president faces war crimes indictment. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I'm Camila Escalante. German chemical giant Bayer has agreed to pay more than $10 billion to settle tens of thousands of claims that its popular Weedkiller Roundup causes cancer. The main ingredient of Roundup is glyphosate, which, according to a 2015 WHO study, could probably cause cancer. The amount includes $1.25 billion set aside to deal with potential claims from people who use Roundup and may develop the form of cancer known as non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in the years to come. Bayer inherited the legal morass when it bought Roundup's manufacturer Monsanto for $63 billion in June of 2018. The settlement covers an estimated 95,000 cases, but Bayer still faces at least 25,000 claims from plaintiffs who have not agreed to be part of the agreement. CARICOM chair and Barbados Prime Minister Mia Amor has expressed concern over the political crisis in Guyana. She further criticized the report by the chief elections officer at Guyana's Elections Commission, who found the ruling party to be the winner of the March 2nd polls despite the recount, showing the opposition as victor.
The CARICOM observer team was of the unshakable belief that the people of Guyana expressed their will at the ballot box on March 2nd, and that the results of the recount, certified as valid by the staff of the Guyana Elections Commission, led to an orderly conclusion on which the declaration of the results of the election could and would be made. Therefore, we must ask, on what grounds and by what form of executive fiat does the chief elections officer determine that he should invalidate one vote, far less over 115,000 votes, when the votes were already certified as valid by the officers of the Guyana Elections Commission in the presence of the said political parties?
The Trinidad-based Caribbean Court of Justice says no later than Wednesday it will issue an order to continue the hold first implemented by Guyana's Court of Appeal, preventing the declaration of the election results until it hears the matter on July the 1st. This comes after the chief elections officer submitted his report to the chairperson of the Elections Commission on Tuesday, showing the ruling a Partnership for National Unity had won the March 2nd polls. That evening, the opposition People's Progressive Party Civic served notice of the appeal court's ruling to the CCJ. The court had decreed that the words "more votes cast" be interpreted to mean more valid votes cast, and that the victor not be announced for 3 days. Amid calls to remove sculptures which idolize colonizers and slave owners across the globe, social groups in Trinidad and Tobago reignited their long-standing request to have the government tear down the statue of Christopher Columbus in the capital. The mayor of Port of Spain withdrew himself from making the decision, calling it a national issue.
Is that the statue should be taken down and placed in the museum. It is our stance as a responsible corporation, and the fact that the capital city and the square where the statue is placed is not only utilized by citizens of Port of Spain, but by the wider population. The matter, therefore, has become a national issue, and as such, beyond the sole purview of the Port of Spain Corporation, therefore, as mayor, I withdraw from the matter as I await the input, advice, and policy decision from relevant arms of the national law.
The French government has said that the COVID-19 pandemic is getting worse as French Guiana and human and material reinforcements are being sent to the country. As of Tuesday, the local government recorded nearly 2,600 confirmed cases and 8 deaths, but officials fear that the numbers of cases will quickly hit 10,000. Among the resources are 25 respirators, other medical equipment, including ones for non-coronavirus patients, and also medicine. And we turn to Havana now, where Laura Lambanino brings us more news from the region.
Thank you so much. Let's take a look at the most recent stories about the Caribbean countries. In the Dominican Republic, over the last 3 months, around 150,000 workers have been laid off in the private sector, reportedly due to the months of lockdown to contain the spread of COVID-19. According to the president of the National Confederation of Trade Union Unity, the sectors most affected by these layoffs are tourism, construction, commerce, hardware stores, private clinics, and free trade zones. Meanwhile, nearly 40% of those who have lost their jobs are people between the ages of 20 and 39. A large plume of dust from the Sahara Desert will continue to affect the Caribbean region for the next few days, causing low visibility and poor air quality. This phenomenon is a mixture of sand and dust that comes all the way from Sahara. The dry dusty mass forms regularly during the last spring, summer and early fall. High winds then blow the dust westward over the tropical Atlantic Ocean. In Haiti, during a visit to Toussaint-Louverture International Airport, President Jovenel Moïse said that the question of reopening the airport has been seriously studied by his Council of Ministers, adding that the work has been done at the airport in recent days to comply with the recommendations of the International Civil Aviation Organization. However, he suggested that the formal reopening depends on several parameters, but it could not take place before June 30. A former paramilitary leader was deported from the U.S. and arrested as soon as he landed in Haiti, where he faces murder and torture charges stemming from killings committed during the political upheaval of the 1990s that was backed by the U.S. government. Emmanuel Constant was among 24 deported migrants who landed in the capital, Port-au-Prince. Human rights groups have accused Constant of killing, raping, and torturing Haitians when he became leader in the front of the Advancement of Progress of Haiti.
I don't know, because they're doing illegal things and y'all accepting it. You're the only place that's accepting this. Haiti is the only place that's accepting this shit.
Where you was born, exactly?
Haiti in America.
In America.
In America.
From Haitian family or American family?
From a Haitian family.
Yeah.
So, regardless, I got the right to choose where the hell I want to be.
Okay.
All my life has been in America.
Okay.
All my life. Okay. I ain't got nobody here. Okay. Not one person.
Now you are not in touch with nobody in Haiti?
Huh? Nobody.
Cuban authorities reported one new COVID-19 case, adding up to a total of 2,319 cases. Meanwhile, no new deaths were reported. During a press conference, the National Director of Epidemiology of the Cuban Ministry of Public Health said that by June 24, 214 patients were admitted to hospitals for clinical epidemiological surveillance, adding that 2,006 samples were studied for COVID-19, of which only one came back positive. Finally, authorities also reported that no deaths caused by COVID-19 were reported in over a week.
That's all we have for now. Let's go back to you in the studio.
Now on to Bolivia, where persecution is intensifying against the movement towards socialism and social leaders, as the country is set to hold elections on September the 6th, so long as the regime doesn't attempt to delay once again. On Tuesday, the de facto government arrested Senate candidate Lucy Escobar and 2 MAS supporters in Cochabamba while they were heading to the Tropico to distribute food in communities in need. They were transferred to La Paz to face charges of terrorism and sedition for addressing an anti-coup protest. Evidence was gathered in part through the regime's cyber patrols aimed at restricting free speech online and monitoring WhatsApp communications. And in response, anti-coup protesters in Cochabamba have blocked a highway to demand the release of the 3 who were illegally arrested on purely political motives. This is the second day of protests in the working-class southern districts of the city. And some rare good news from Bolivia. Ismael Marquina has been released from the prison, the maximum security prison of El Albra. He was a patriotic police officer from Chimoré who refused to join the coup in November. He's been in preventative imprisonment for 7 months because he refused to turn his gun on the people and continues to face charges, but he'll now be able to defend himself from those false accusations outside of prison facilities. We'll take a short break now. When we come back, some news from Chile and Australia. Join us again in a moment. Joining me now is Dr. Rodrigo Acuna, independent political analyst and an expert on Latin American studies based in Sydney, Australia. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
So next month, Adriana Rivas will be attending an extradition court date having to do with crimes committed under Chile's dictatorship. Tell us about this case.
Well, Adriana Rivas is a confirmed, self-confessed former DINA agent. The DINA organization was the intelligence organization under the Pinochet dictatorship, which was in charge of some of the most brutal crimes carried out during the dictatorship. They kidnapped political opponents, they would torture them, they would disappear them. And Mrs. Rivas, in an interview in 2014, claimed that she had worked for the head of Chilean intelligence during the during the 1970s, Manuel Contreras, but she claimed that she had only worked as his personal secretary and that in terms of other jobs that she did under the DINA, he was an intelligence analyst. Well, it turns out that Mrs. Rivas was actually wanted by the Chilean judicial system. He had fled in 2006, and she's actually wanted for 7 kidnappings. And the Chilean government eventually put in an extradition request from the Australian government, and she was eventually arrested, and she has been for the last year in a women's correctional facility fighting the extradition process.
Okay, so what do you think will be the outcome of this court date, and what sort of pressures may factor into the final decision? And also, what has been the record in bringing known criminals of Pinochet's dictatorship to justice?
The record of bringing known criminals under the Pinochet dictatorship in Chile is mixed. It's not terrible. It's not the best either. I think the Argentine judicial system did a lot better. But certainly many members of the Lautaro Brigade, the brigade that Diana Rivas belonged to, they have actually been charged and processed and actually found guilty. So the chances of Ms. Rivas being extradited to Chile, I think, are actually quite good, given the fact that there is a lot of evidence that has been presented against her in terms of being involved in torture, not only being involved in torture as a DINA agent, but in fact actually being one of the worst DINA agents during that period. So I do think that unless the Attorney General in this country, who can actually override the decision or not decide to extradite Rivas to Chile, unless he intervenes, then Rivas will certainly be extradited to Chile.
And once if she is to be extradited to Chile, what sort of justice would she face there?
Well, I think she certainly will get a fair hearing. I think that she will certainly be have legal representation. And like I said, there have been many members of the DINA organization, the Lautaro Brigade, including the head of the DINA organization, Manuel Contreras, who was eventually sentenced to over 527 years prison. So I do think that there is a very good possibility that she will be not only be extradited, but she will be placed on trial. And again, given the evidence against her, I think that a guilty verdict is highly likely.
Okay, so bringing you back to South America, to Chile, and the protests which began in October, but which really continued throughout the coronavirus period, to what extent do you see any parallels between Pinochet's Chile and the levels of suppression or repression we've witnessed over the past several months?
Well, there are many parallels, because the response by the Piñera administration has been brutal. I mean, declaring a state of martial law eventually, and having the Chilean military out on the street, I think was a complete excessive measure on behalf of Piñera. And the Carabineros and the Chilean military, for the first 2 weeks once their presence was declared on the streets, started to engage in serious human rights violations. There are a lot of organizations which have documented this and denounced this. The number of protesters who have lost their eyesight because of the use of pellet guns that have been used intentionally against their faces in the protest is certainly quite akin to some of the practices that were taking place during the dictatorship. Another parallel, of course, is that people are protesting precisely against the Pinochet constitution. The Chilean constitution was actually established in the early 1980s under a very quite dubious referendum, and it privatized a considerable section or considerable parts of the Chilean economy. So most Chileans are quite upset about the fact that the country's education system is highly privatized. The country's pension system is privatized, and while people may do everything correct, signing on board, saving all their pennies, etc., once they get to retirement, the money simply isn't enough, or in some cases, isn't even there. So the amount of grievances that the average Chilean has against the way that the economic system is run in Chile is considerable. It is one of the most privatized countries in Latin America, and while some people have first world standards, the vast majority don't. Vast majority of Chileans are not living any type of miracle. They are living in a third world country, and they are sick of it.
So let's go back to Australia, which is an ally of the United States, though we don't hear as much about it here in the Americas. But we have heard more about Australia when it comes to its foreign policy on China lately. So tell us a bit about that policy, and what does the Australian government think will be the benefit of working with Washington on that?
Well, the Australian government likes to have it's trying to have its cake and eat it too. Australia, since the 1970s, has established diplomatic relations with China, and of course, the trade relations have increased significantly since China started to become a global power economically. On the political front and on the strategic military front, of course, Australia is an ally of the United States. Australia has been involved in just about every war that the United States has requested it to be involved in, and in the last 10 or so years, even longer, the United States has been taking a position towards China, or trying to contain China, especially militarily. So Australia has decided to jump on board this strategy, and unfortunately, it hasn't, or there have been consequences for that, because China decided to impose tariffs on Australian products. So how did this take place? Well, this took place because Australia decided to support Trump's calls for an independent or an investigation regarding China's activities with coronavirus. It took place because the Trump administration took a very aggressive position towards China, alleging that China was not cooperating with the World Health Organization, etc., etc., etc. and Australia has decided to support that position. As a consequence, China took retaliatory measures, and they have had an impact on Australian trade.
Thank you so much for your time. We've been speaking to Dr. Rodrigo Acuna, who is an independent political analyst and expert on Latin America, joining us from Sydney, Australia.
Thank you.
We'll take a short break. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back. South Africa plans to roll out the continent's first coronavirus vaccine trial this week. The vaccine candidate developed by the Oxford Jenner Institute in the United Kingdom is already being evaluated there, where 4,000 participants have signed up for the trial. In South Africa, the University of Witwatersrand is collaborating with the University of Oxford and the Oxford Jenner Institute in the trial of the vaccine known as ChAdOx1 nCoV-19. The pilot will involve 2,000 people, including 50 who have HIV.
These 8 participants form part of what is known as Group 1, which is a group where it's a small group of 50 individuals where we're trying to understand 2 important issues. The first issue is the safety of the vaccine, especially in terms of what would be common side effects, and the second issue is how well the body mounts an immune response against the vaccine. Once there's about 60% of the population that have developed immunity, we expect that effective reproductive rate to drop to under 1. It doesn't mean the virus is going to go away. But once there's 60% of the population, especially the adult population, that becomes immune, we expect that effective reproductive rate to go to under 1, which basically means the virus will still be around, it will still circulate, but its chain of transmission has been interrupted, which is important.
Kosovo's president, Kashim Thaki, has been indicted on charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity for his role in the country's 1990s conflict. The prosecutor said that Thaki and 9 others are criminally responsible for nearly 100 murders, torture, and enforced disappearances. The accusations covering Kosovo's independence war against Serbia in 98-99 have to be confirmed by the judge at the Kosovo Specialist Chambers before formal charges are announced. The war cost more than 10,000 lives and only ended after a NATO air campaign. Kosovo declared its independence in 2008, something Serbia still does not recognize. In Italy, 28 refugees who were rescued at sea have tested positive for the coronavirus. The test results represent the largest cluster yet among newly arrived migrants after a handful of positive cases were recorded in recent days in Greece. The migrants are being held on the ship Moby Zaza off the coast of Sicily, where some would-be asylum seekers are taken to undergo quarantine after being rescued at sea. And we've reached the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telstarenglish.net. And join us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telstar English, I'm Camila Escalante. Thank you for watching.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Sean todos muy bienvenidos a Vidas.